This is for the nerds, this is for the brainiacs, this what we deserve. Go ahead and play it back, you ain't gonna touch me, you not gonna do nothing, you are not above me, I bet you wish you was me, I know it, I know.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Only Friends. Wow, we really just had that Freudian slip. Finally, it's Monday. Jeez. It's going to be a long day, obviously. Welcome back. Hope you all had a good weekend. I'm joined, as always, today only by 5 of my friends. No Christian Soto in tow, but I am joined by the usual cast of characters. How was your weekend, everybody? Andre, your parents were in town? Yeah. Yeah. What'd you guys get into?
We had good food.
Good food. You get a little of the munchies.
Yeah, a little bit. All right, so let's get this out of the way. This is supposed to be a private conversation.
No, there's no such thing anymore.
My mom has arthritis, allegedly.
Mm-hmm.
And she decided, let's go to the weed store, buy some weed. Okay, I should mention that these two are very traditional Asian parents. Okay. So, they've been dabbling a little bit here and there. Or my mom's been dabbling a little bit. And my dad basically just wants her to sleep every night. So they went to the store and they bought, I don't know if there's a lot, 2,000 milligrams.
Why are you referencing me?
You know about drugs?
My God. Are we talking edibles or what?
In one dose, that's definitely a lot.
It was like tinctures and joints.
They probably maxed out, it sounds like.
Is that like a month's worth?
Depending on how you use it.
Not for Conrad.
It's
like a week for, yeah.
Connor, how much do you go through a week?
I don't even know, honestly.
So the humor to this story is there's some sort of bargain that you can get for spinning a wheel. I'm not sure. I don't know. But you were referencing some sort of wheel that they get to spin for a giveaway.
Yeah, this is the brutal part too that I didn't mention to you guys as much. But if you spend more than $80, you get to spin a wheel.
Mm-hmm.
So what do my parents do?
They spent
$80.
They spent $81.
They broke up the purchases just to spin the wheel more.
Right, of course.
That's just good business.
Yeah.
You spend 80, I'll spend 80. We'll get to spin the wheel twice, double the perks.
What were their wheel spin gifts?
Some of them were just points, loyalty points. They got free joints. I think that's mostly it, actually. But she also said, if anybody has it. So I stayed in the car and let them go. Because I was I don't want to go through that process, yada, yada, yada. And then she texted me. She's like, Nevada licenses get 20% off. You have to come inside. So obviously I came inside. It's been wild between, I've told you guys, not so subtle racism throughout the days. Just randomly, I have my all of my kitchen equipment on the island and stuff. It'll just be gone. I don't know where it is, and my mom's just put it in random places. I'll wake up and she's in my bathroom, and I have no clue why. She has her own bathroom. Good morning, Andre. What are you doing?
That's how I felt when I saw her coming out with a cloud of smoke behind her from the tent on our fucking back porch with Conrad in tow.
No, she doesn't like Conrad.
Hi, Mrs. Hankshua. What's going on? She's wake and bake, it's the usual Conrad visit.
No, she wouldn't hang out with people like Conrad.
What do you mean, people?
Me and your mom would be best friends, honestly.
I'm pretty honestly.
She makes Yuka-John, right?
I think she would love you. I really do think so.
Does she make Yuka-John?
You might change her entire worldview, single-handedly ending racism.
He's one of the
in
good
his family.
ones.
Allegedly.
That's
Alleged.
growing up in a super whitewashed community back home. Like that's the way the old people would speak. They're like, oh, he's one of the good ones. It's like, what? What does that mean?
That justifies my prejudice against all the other ones.
Yeah. Obviously. I'll never forget this. This is a crazy story. I was staying with my grandmother on my dad's side, who I'm not like, I almost said my dad's mom. Like that's how not close to her I was. And I was like 4 or 5 years old. And I was there. It was something in the summer. Like she was watching me. And I'll never forget. This was like so jarring to me now looking back on it. But she was like at the screen door on her porch. And she goes something to the effect of like those colored people over there, so something like to that effect, right? And I'm 4, so to me, colors are like, you know, the like a rainbow,
Colors of the rainbow,
right?
Yeah.
I'm freaking out. I'm sprinting to the door, like expecting to see some like
Rainbow people.
yeah, like some rainbow colored human that I'm unaware of in my short time on Earth. I'm just like, where? And she's like, over there. I'm like, they're brown. Like, there's only one color.
Those
What are
aren't
we even doing
multicolored
here? I don't
people.
understand. What's that?
Those aren't multicolored.
No, and it should obviously go without saying we were in a trailer park, so it's no shock that this was her worldview. Moving on from uncomfortable undertones. Before we get into
Really
more
towing the line.
uncomfortable undertones. We did do another Poker Out Loud Hand of the Week. This week it was Christian Soto versus Nate Searski, where Christian had opened the button and Nate had defended the big blind. We landed on a river spot. You can see Chin saying that he has 2 sizes here, overbet in 2/3. And, you know, something I guess worth mentioning is whatever quote we're taking, it's not necessarily going to be accurate. Christian didn't run this spot prior to speaking his thoughts out loud. So there is some discrepancy to be used. These are 2 weird sizings, in my opinion, to have. But nevertheless, he is choosing overbet with his hand. So we asked you guys what hand he has. There are actually a lot of logical guesses. For the most part, you're going to be guessing hands that make 2 pair on the end. So things like King 7 suited make a lot of sense. But that was not the hand that Christian had. We're going to roll the clip, and you're going to get to see what the man was betting with. I don't know why we had an audio issue. This is obviously my doing since I clipped it out. Anyway, basically Christian is just speaking what was written in the quote, saying that he lands here with top of range or near top of range, is going to have a catch-all size of like 2/3 and then an overbet. He thinks this hand fits strong enough into the overbet category and he goes for it. If you want to see the conclusion of that hand, head over to solveforwhy.io, sign up for the all-in access pass, and you'll get to see 7 full seasons of Poker Out Loud, including today's newest episode, which came out including this hand. We do have a winner who guessed Ace King correctly. John Manuel, congratulations. I've DM'd you on Instagram. Just go ahead and that's right. Let's give it up.
Yeah,
Let's give it up,
John.
John.
Right.
Good job, man.
Wait,
Sporadic
John Manuel.
approval.
Yeah, it's his name, John Manuel.
That's my friend.
Is it? Is it really?
I know him from Jersey.
Oh shit!
rigged. This whole thing is
That
rigged.
was absolutely rigged.
Obviously not. I chose him, and I didn't know. There was like 10 or 12 people, give or take, that gave it correctly. I mean, I didn't even choose him. He randomly got plucked out of a random number generator. But
Lucky plucker.
in any event, you get $30 off the Solve for Why merch store. So go ahead and follow the instructions DM to you, and we'll take care of you. Speaking of house cleaning, while we're getting it out of the way, we do have a Poker Out Loud Academy coming up The dates are April 27th to May 30th. I think we have one seat left for this first group
April
of 9.
27th to April 30th. That'd
Oh,
be
yeah.
a hell of an
That would be a
academy.
long ass academy.
You were there when I was making these ads, and I could not get the dates right for some reason. Like I was putting
May
kept putting
3rd.
May
It was, she made like 4 different versions, and it was May 3rd every time. And after the first version, I was like, yeah, it's April 30th, not May 3rd. She's like, okay, cool.
and then
What
I
would we
just
charge
changed
for a
it to May
month-long
30th
academy?
instead.
Yeah.
I don't know why my brain just was not accepting the dates that you chose.
You know what? It probably has something to do with the moon aligning with the
I
stars.
think it
and-
was right before the full moon.
right.
So.
Our chakras were just a little
Maybe
disappointed.
you're
If you
just
want us
supposed
to
to do a
run a
month-long-
month-long academy,
Month-long
go ahead and
academy.
tell us in the comments below,
That would sound
and
like
maybe we'll try to make
torture.
that happen. What do
Yeah,
you think,
we-
He
Mark?
would be
we will-
saying it, and I'm writing it as he's saying it, and I still write it wrong.
It sounds like torture for everybody involved. if it was a
So,
month
Melissa,
long.
we're going to need a new graphic. Those dates are going to be April 27th
Change
to
that.
April 30th.
4 days.
I'm
4-day
just trying
long
to trap
academy.
them in a long academy.
Yeah, it's going to be a 4-day long academy, a little bit different structure than what you've seen before from us. So day 1 will be all theory. We're going to cover basic game theory principles. We're going to get into effectively global strategies. So what c-bet strategies look like at a zoomed out level, board textures, range construction preflop, et cetera, et cetera. Day 2, you'll be playing all poker out loud for 8 full hours with a commentator in the booth, noting hands worthy of discussion. Day 3, we'll cover a couple of those hands in the early portions of the day, and then we'll go over a more granular look at c-betting strategies, turn and river distributions, as well as the strategies to follow. And then day 4 will be a final day of Poker Out Loud. So there's a lot to take in over the 4-day course. Again, we have 1 seat remaining for that first group of 9. Should that seat fill, we will open a second group of 9. And the plan will be to just stagger the days. So when group 1 is playing, group 2 will be learning, and vice versa. Head over to head over to academy.solveforwhy.io if you'd like to sign up for the April Poker Out Loud Academy. All right. Now that the heavy lifting's out of the way, let's have a talk. Let's have a little chat. This past weekend, we saw a little drama. Not a lot of drama. We were glued. We were tuned in.
I haven't watched poker in a while.
Did you watch on Friday?
I watched them.
Same.
I hate to admit it, but it does suck you in when it has that reality TV element.
I can't tell you the last time I watched a poker stream that one of my close friends wasn't playing on. I watched for a solid 2 hours.
I don't remember where I was, but I had it up on my phone. I was out somewhere, and I had it up on my phone watching.
So the craziest thing is I somehow started to tune in right around when the game got bigger and things started to unfold. But I watched for the full 90 minutes after Bunny had left. I don't know what I expected to see. It was like listening to a post-game show after your team just lost, right? It's just like all copium, where I'm just like waiting for someone to provide some sort of insight that I don't already have, and really get to the bottom of like what the hell is going on here. So to kind of catch everybody up, what's been going on? Hustler Live has been doing high stakes poker. Are they doing Thursdays and Fridays or just Fridays?
I think it's Fridays, but maybe Thursdays too.
Yeah, I know that they're
high
following a
stakes?
similar structure to what Ryan was producing when he was at Live at the Bike, where they have like the 5-5 big ante game. They have a 10-20 game, I think, midweek. But I think that they try to run at least one high stakes show a week every Friday for sure, and then maybe a secondary one, depending on maybe Garrett's availability or whatever lineups they can put together. But in any event, Hustler Live's been running for a little under a year now, I think about 9 months or so. And they've really come onto the scene. They made a huge splash with the 200-400 game, including Ivy, Durr, Garrett, Mickey, Lucky, myself, and Gal. That was probably, I should have checked this, I guess, prior, but I would assume that has to be top 3 most watched free streams that has been ran. I could be underselling it, or I could be overselling it though, because I think when they first did the $1 million buy-in at, or not $1 million buy-in, but $1 million cash game at Live at the Bike. That one probably got a lot of eyeballs as well. But, in general, like we don't have a lot of free streams, right? Most everything that is high stakes with big names is going to be behind the Poker Girl paywall. So this is as close to high stakes poker, if you will, that we can get for free on the internet. This and I would assume the Triton streams. In any event, they've created this niche space, or at least they've inserted themselves in this niche space where in LA it's just them and Live at the Bike, and now Live at the Bike is moving off of YouTube onto broadcast television. And then elsewhere, I guess they're indirectly competing against like the Texas live streams. But Texas is new. Texas is very underwhelming by comparison, I would say. They don't really have the characters yet. Basically, they don't have Garrett. They don't have Garrett. They don't have Andy. They don't have Gall. Well, nobody has Gall now, RIP. But they haven't really gotten to an established point now where we have a reason to watch every Friday. Everybody knows what they're getting with Garrett on Fridays, and our eyeballs are glued for it. So I understand the show that they're trying to produce, and I understand the market that they're in. And we've spoken about this before. We have a promotion problem in this game, and I think these live streams do a great job of sort of correcting that, right? And the path in which they do this is consistency, 5 days a week, every single week. You can count on it. It is getting the same cast of characters, and it's developing narratives around those characters, right? Christian told that story about Armenian Mike where he says, "My life is bluff." Now they're turning that into merch. Like I saw somebody wearing like a bluff hat, which apparently this is just a thing now. So they do a great job of leaning into this. And that brings us to the character of discussion in the most recent times, which is the Poker Bunny. She has a pretty interesting story, I guess, if you will. Well, she has a fascinating story, but more so the surface element that everybody's a little bit more familiar with. I think she first broke onto the scene a year and a half ago, maybe right before the pandemic, so like 2 years ago. Initially, she was Post-Flop Malone on like all socials, and that was the moniker she was using and kind of the character she was creating. She was very divisive then. A lot of instances of her both publicly and privately kind of coming at people. I know that she has like recently or since then deleted that former account and started a new one, but like, there were just a lot of accounts of her kind of accosting people like Marley. I remember there was a big Instagram storm where she went after pads. There was another time where, at the Bellagio, she kind of got in the face of a few other female players, including like Chrissy B.
A lot of antagonistic behavior towards women.
Yes. Yeah. In general, it's mostly been women. There have been like some attacks towards men as well, but it always seemed to be pretty, I don't want to say calculated necessarily, because I don't want to assume things I don't know, but it was always directed at people who had a platform, right? So it was certain to get amplified. During all this time, she was also very public about how hard she studied and how much work she was putting into PO. She was streaming on Twitch a lot of her study sessions as well as play, and nothing was really churning, right? Like I think the only reason why she was spoken about at that point in time was just she was just a very disruptive character. Somewhere along the lines, she pulled a heel turn, if you will, and basically just rebranded herself, right? So she changed her last name to Lollinger in honor of Linus.
Is that a legal name change?
I think so.
I think it's legal, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm like pretty confident that she
I wonder how
legally changed it.
Linus feels about that.
It's strong. It's strong. It's an homage to the great one.
Sort of like a marriage without his consent.
Yeah. I mean, she's 23, it's like she is going to get after it. And like, I do talk about this a lot. When you're young, you have the freedom to make a lot of mistakes. Usually I'm talking about risking.
I think we talk about 23-year-olds just in general, including Landon. I think we talk about 23-year-olds as if they're like babies, but that's not that young.
No.
You know?
Well, look, you're still responsible for your actions, and you have to be, or you don't have to be anything, but like, you're expected to adhere to some level of a value system. But I guess what I'm trying to say is more so that we're forgiving of mistakes made in youth, and the world as a whole is pretty forgiving of these mistakes. So oftentimes I'm saying, like, when you're young, take risks, because you're young enough to just bounce, and you have a support system around you most of the time that will ensure that, like, you don't go homeless. But I think, like, the things we don't talk about are the risks that you can take with your personal brand, or your reputation, or your clout, or the respect of your peers, or whatever the case may be. I think that there's this idea that you have to mold yourself in a very adult-like fashion as you start to come into industry, because people will remember that first impression forever. But I think with social platforms and everything being what they are now, and seemingly the world losing its mind in front of our face, we're pretty forgiving of
maybe desensitized is the better.
Yeah, that could be true.
Yeah.
Kim Kardashian's never been a bigger figure. Kanye's
Right.
never been spoken about more. These people are literally cracking in front of us. So yeah, I don't think we have the same standards any longer of holding those with the most sane, moral, value-driven aura or brand in the highest regard, right? Like, we want the drama.
Yeah, we want a freak show.
Yeah, we're here for the tea.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, honestly, that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Like, it's good to give vulnerability a platform. It's good to give authenticity a platform. It becomes a little scary when people start to manipulate those in a cliquey way.
Because it's hard to know what is truly authentic and what is kind of contrived,
like a shtick.
Because today, in today's day and age, controversy draws attention, so people can sort of make that happen.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me back to Bunny. I know her a little bit just from before she even moved to the States. She had reached out just inquiring about Salt for Why or whatever, and we just kind of like talked shop a little bit over the past few years. But I also know what's been publicized about her, and I think that that's where it becomes a little unclear how much of this is calculated and how much of this is like her actual persona. Like things like getting photographed with a laptop and PO up during a live game, things like almost getting thrown out of the building with 5 tables left in the ladies event because of an emotional outcry over not getting enough media coverage. Again, the referencing to a lot of the divisive behavior with other women in the game or other people with platforms. And then on top of that, like if you follow her social media, she does seem to curate this narrative that she's a bit spastic and that she's a terrible poker player. Like she constantly reiterates that she's terrible, but it seems to almost be tongue-in-cheek because it's right in line with also nobody works harder than me, nobody's running more sims than me. There aren't even men in this industry that are putting in the same time and effort. So,
let alone women.
Right.
No woman has as much passion as her for the game, apparently.
And for what it's worth, like
News
I think
to
this
me.
is partly why we speak about 23-year-olds as though they're infantile, because there's just like such a lack of big picture view, right? Like you just don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you haven't experienced. And honestly, like not even just speaking about Bunny, but just like youth in general, when you're that age and you're relatively good at something and you've put in any level of effort into it, it's very easy to believe that nobody else is doing what you're doing and that you are so far above the realm of average, like so close to elite, that people are going to find out real soon just how good and talented you are. And then 10 years later, the world really corrects that and humbles you, right? Like you just really start to understand as you grow and mature and come into your 30s and just experience a lot more where it's not a meritocracy and the work in doesn't equal results. And there are people who are infinitely better than you and infinitely worse than you that are putting up better and worse results. And it's just not a one-to-one comparison really in any regard. And I don't care if we're talking about poker, academia, athletics, or anything in between. Someone will always be better than you. And there will always be a pool of people that you're better than that constantly prop you up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the sooner that lesson is kind of distilled down inside of you where you're just you and you fall into some area in this spectrum, right? And like, you know, you just want to feel good about where you fit. Like, I've worked hard to be in this place and that's the best version of me. That's a pretty mature outlook and it's healthy and it allows for longevity. I don't think there are a lot of 20-somethings that are... I've been in these Discords, Melissa.
Yeah, I know. I've met plenty of early 20s people who have humility. I just think that maybe we see louder voices that are a little more egocentric, and
Well,
that's
part of
fine. But
Part of being humble is probably not being one of the most outspoken
Yeah.
people about your talent.
yeah, so we don't hear from them. But I just think that 23 is not that young. Like, I feel like maybe in relative to like where you guys are, but in my opinion, there are 18-year-olds who act extremely mature. I don't think I think it's
possible to be mature for your age, but like let's look at other industries, right? So crypto is a really good example. There's a lot of youth in that industry. There's a lot of, it's a meme culture, right? The majority of the crypto industry is like largely a meme culture.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because there's so much youth that is a part of the talented pool. And I think that that's pretty reflective also of...
It also has like largely like 4chan and Reddit and forum roots. So that probably helps too.
Yeah. And I think that that's pretty reflective of not facing any like bigger picture pressure to grow up, right? Because they have this specialized skill set within a particular space, how they act around that skill set isn't really all that important. Where it's like, if you compare that instead to like tech, it's pretty critical that you're able to carry on a conversation with somebody who's 20 years your senior that has a million times your worth because
That's
he's your
true.
new VC.
Yeah, that's true.
You know
It's
what I
sort
mean?
of like professional conduct sort of goes out the window when you don't have higher ups that you're always interacting with.
Correct. And I think that poker is much closer to crypto than it is to tech in that regard. So I think that that's why maybe I have this specific view is because there's no rush to grow up in this space where it's like, if you're trying to develop an app and you have to pitch to Mark Cuban,
You have to be professional.
right? Even if it's not you, like that's the fake it till you make it part in
Yeah.
that industry, where here it's like, what will garner the most amount of clicks?
Right.
And sometimes it's wearing bunny ears and, kind of hopping up and down like, the Easter bunny, I guess.
Yeah.
Just the bunny in general. Doesn't have to be the Easter.
I mean, who knows what'll happen on Easter? Maybe it's actually... Do we get 2 sets of bunny ears or what?
Jesus rises from the dead.
Yeah. Maybe we have Jesus. Someone dresses up as Jesus.
Let's not give any ideas.
It's a good idea, though.
Maybe you could do it.
Maybe.
You'd make a good Jesus.
Yeah, he's got the hair.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks, Brian.
the Nordic Jesus.
The Nordic Jesus. Why not?
I'm gonna stay as far away as possible.
Sure. So the last thing I want to address before we kind of move into the events that occurred on Friday is this idea that perhaps the poker bunny as we know her is a bit of a contrived character that she's utilizing to kind of further her brand and career. I mean, like, if we zoom out, like, she hasn't been in poker for all that long, and she's secured backing and has a permanent seat in some of the biggest high stakes games televised. So it's not like it's not working, right? And it's also not like we can't point to another iteration that did fail. The post-flop Malone character that she had developed was a clear heel, right? Like the community just shunned that where it was like, no, we don't like this divisive.
I don't really remember that too much. That character.
Yeah, well, and that's fair, right? Because
Yeah.
it was a whole lot less relevant. Like, if you see the tweet that Bunny put out today, replying to D Moon Girl, we can kind of see a little bit of what I'm talking about between the two different characters. So she's basically saying like, D Moon said like, at that age, you're just not ready for the spotlight. Just leave her alone, kind of thing. And she's saying like, no, I'm not only ready for this. Like, I've like attempted to build something to garner the spotlight. And a lot of this isn't even necessarily EV driven as far as I can tell. The thing that stands out to me is her saying like, prior to developing this character that she's currently portraying, the world was often cruel to her without the balance of support. And though she has her though she has her criticisms now, and the angry mob may still exist, there's also a big group of people that like show a lot of love for Poker Bunny.
Yeah.
And I think we see that in the comments. I think we see that in the viewership.
Around the age range of 50 to 60, male. Right?
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
I mean, it's a market.
It is indeed a market. And honestly, it's a big market in poker.
Yeah.
If we're being
it
clear,
is.
like coming from the standpoint of having run of running a training site, like we've done market analytics, and the largest pool of liquidity available in the poker market as a targeted group is white men between the ages of 38 and 45 with expendable income that lean Republican and voted Trump. Like that's the group.
Sounds about right.
So it's like, yeah, I mean, when you look at either side of that group, right, like the slightly younger, slightly older crowd, it's going to be the slightly older crowd that has not.
But do we think that maybe she wasn't getting support before because she was antagonizing people?
Yeah.
You know? I don't think it's necessarily the whole Bunny gimmick that is making people support her, but maybe just the lack of attacking people.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more to this to uncover that I don't want to get too deep into. But like, I think that prior to being post-flop Malone, or maybe during, I don't know, but like when she spent her time in Australia, she had a lot of well-documented struggles there. From getting like kicked out of the casino to maybe even permanently banned. There's a clip somewhere on the internet floating around where she was like screaming at the table during a live stream. And if I recall correctly, it was based off of accusations of her being raped by somebody either employed in the casino or happening on the casino ground, something like that. So even though that wasn't an antagonistic thing, and it was something where I think like ultimately she wanted more support, it came off antagonistic.
Yeah.
And it led the opposite to the opposite response, right? It was just like full-blown hate. And that's kind of scary in a regard, because it's like if we're assuming that there's truth to that story, A, it deserves to be heard, but B, it's one of those things where it's like you don't necessarily want the message from the person to get convoluted with the delivery mechanism.
Yeah.
Right? Like just because she didn't deliver the message well doesn't discredit the message.
It's also very hard to be heard with that kind of message in a male-dominated environment. Sure. There's plenty of men who don't even think rape happens, which is bizarre to me, but that's another story.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole conversation that we could save for another date too, because I do think that there's a much deeper, more nuanced conversation to have there, in the sense that, it's a terrible thing that happens and goes underreported and certainly is underpunished. But along the same lines, it's a he said, she said thing too, where it's like now men are often kind of put in first of all, like that's maybe a little exaggerated, because
it's a chicken and egg thing. There wouldn't like the majority of men wouldn't be, innocent men wouldn't be suffering with potential allegations.
Correct.
If there weren't the number.
There wasn't a
of bad
blurry line.
eggs
Yeah,
who
yeah.
actually do
And
it.
also, like, you have to create a blurry line to be accused and believe, like,
Yeah.
to be believed that you're being accused. So, yeah, I mean, I think the Me Too movement kind of shined a light on all of that. And there's a whole discussion there that I don't want to get into. But that kind of brings us to current day. And this idea of, are live streams reality TV, right? So is this a show that is meant to showcase poker in its native state, with the option to showcase talent, or the option to showcase characters, or the option to showcase some combination of all, right? Like, so I know PokerGo specifically, their mission is to kind of get the most talented players in the world and give us, the audience, a nice healthy mix of their skill set mixed with fun characters who make the game enjoyable to watch, right? And that seems to work pretty well for them. But they also have a lot of things in their favor. They have a 8-figure studio that they're filming out of. They have access to literally everyone, and they have a budget that is through the roof, right? Like, if they're spending $40K just to turn the lights on, that might be comparable to maybe the entire weekly budget for a show like Hustler Live. So with that said, then, can other shows insert themselves and compete without adhering to that template? Obviously, I think the answer is yes, but we kind of toe a weird line of, well, is it, are we here for the poker, or are we here for the sideshow, right? And Garrett kind of made that point after the fact, and also in the only tweet that he put out replying to Bunny, where it was kind of something to the regard of, look, I've always played and watched poker for the poker.
Mhm.
And that's the first and foremost reason why I think I'm here and why people are tuning in. So I don't care about the antics. I don't care about, you can dress however you want. You can talk however you want. You can do whatever you want, so long as it doesn't compromise the integrity of the game, and so long as it doesn't become so disruptive that the game itself doesn't operate any longer.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really fair and valid criticism. So the question then becomes like, well, how or what's Hustler's role in policing this, if anything?
Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, I'm kind of at first was very sort of like taking this stance of like, this is gross and I don't like this, to now I'm viewing it a little bit more towards a reality TV lens, in which case, like, I understand the role she's playing in it as sort of the loose cannon of the reality show. I think that in terms of just the game, though, I would prefer if women were held to the same standard of conduct as men, in that, you know, we're allowed to criticize behavior. It's not misogynistic to criticize someone's behavior because they are slowing the game down consistently or drawing excessive attention to themselves while other people are in hands, or, you know, clearly they have a camera that's dedicated to following her around the room when she stands up, including back angles and chest angles. And it's just sort of, in my opinion, it's demeaning to everybody involved, like not only women, but also the men watching. They think these men are just drooling imbeciles that just want to see whatever. And then the production themselves are presenting themselves, and I don't think that they genuinely are this way, but the way that they are running this makes them look very creepy.
Yeah.
So I just don't think it's a great look for anybody, but I understand it from a reality TV lens, and, you know, in general, I don't think reality TV producers are very well respected anyway. So
Sure. Well, I don't think respect is the ultimate goal. I think views and monetizing the stream is first and foremost, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But just to expand upon a little bit of what you said, you're kind of referencing a bit of after she left, Ben thought his mic was off and said something to the effect of like, she's clearly not in a headspace to play this game, or she's basically something along the lines of like, this game is too much for her, right? And Mark Goon, the commentator, basically went on a bit of a rant saying how misogynistic that was. And what you're kind of saying is,
not.
if this were a man who's
Like,
clearly
if Landon
having
showed up
what's that
in a banana hammock and moose antlers,
You can get the graphic in a
you
second.
know, and
yeah.
was doing this, and it's like, okay, you know, you slow down a game every now and then, you make a mistake every now and then, fine, but this is a consistent thing clearly. And if Landon had done that like once, everyone would be freely criticizing him. I mean, I think it's fine to like do what you want to do and do what you have to do to get clicks, but we can't be like mad that people have criticisms about it and calling them misogynist.
Yeah, I didn't really understand the misogynistic angle in the sense of like, is he, at no point did Ben imply that because she's a girl, she can't play high stakes poker.
Right.
He's implying she's having an unhinged moment on air.
Yeah.
And that disqualifies her from
Yeah.
being fit to
He
play.
never said anything about gender at all.
Right. And I feel like that would be very obvious if it were a guy kind of like, you know, effectively like, I mean, we're gonna cut to the clip here in a minute, but like effectively misclicking her way through a handful of spots to the point where she was flustered and had to get up. If a guy did that, it would be, I mean, maybe we would qualify it as tilt, right? Maybe we'd say he's steaming. Maybe we would, I don't know, maybe nicer terminology is utilized. I think that's probably pretty fair to say that more benefit of the doubt is given to men, particularly.
If anything, it would be, I think, an age thing. Like if a young dude
Yeah.
was on there flustered and misclicking all the time, I think he would get the same type of criticism.
Yeah, I kind of tend to agree. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit after we see these clips. So I just want to kind of recap what actually happened on Friday, and we'll go through a couple clips. So first and foremost, we're hitting about hour 4 of the stream at this point, and you're usually about 5.5 hours long. And in typical Garrett fashion, he finds a way to up the stakes. So he's mashing this game. I believe he's like the only winner at this point, or maybe Bunny's up small, but the game was 100, 200, 200 big blind ante. And I don't know if they're just doing a round of strategies or if they put the 400 on permanently.
I think they did. I think it was 1, 2, 4.
Yeah, I mean, look, nobody's better at this than Garrett, and I respect the hell out of it because, you know, I'm all for increasing the gamble, upping the stakes anytime that everybody is willing to do so. And that's partly why I enjoy playing with Garrett. It's like, I know that at some point the game's probably going to double in size, but I come prepared for that. Like, I have enough experience in that world, and I expect it. And I learned the hard way, right? Like the first time I did live at the bike, I didn't expect that. I was supposed to play like 4 sessions of 2550 that ended up being like 2550, 100, 200 almost consistently.
Yeah.
And it's just like, holy shit, I lost $100,000 in this quote unquote quarter 50 game that's actually like 1-2, and you know, 5 buy-ins is pretty reasonable. So, you know, basically the game did get bigger, right? And there's a lot to account for there because I did think that it sort of led to this series of events. So the first clip we're going to look at is we're playing 5-handed, I believe, and the game is 1-2-4 now with a 200 ante. And we're going to see Poker Bunny first to act with pocket kings. So I sped this up. It's a very long hand, but effectively she limps with a $500 chip. Now, I suppose that there's a world where she could claim that she thought that they were still playing 1-2. But if you look prior to her limping, she looks directly at the 400 and chooses to throw out one big chip. So I don't know if this is intentional or not, but here we are. She does limp. We see she faces a raise off of like an effective 25 big blind stack where he 8Xs it, and Tiger then cold calls. She 3-bets, of course, with pocket kings. Only Tiger calls. We see a queen 9-7 2 diamond board. She bets insanely small, 20% pot. He check raises, again, very small, and now they have 0.5 SPR behind. I don't think the strategy of the hand is all that important. It doesn't really matter if she calls or jams. It's kind of whatever. She has the king of diamonds. You can't misplay this spot. Just don't fold. Turns to 7 of clubs. Awesome card for her hand. she's probably way ahead, way behind situation. He checks, she checks back, whatever, induce some river bluffs, seems fine. River ace of spade, he all but puts her all in, betting like 15,000. And she doesn't take very much time before just mucking it. And that, like, I would assume has to be in the forefront of her mind. Some conversation ensued thereafter where she asked Tiger, was I at least good on the turn? Implying that, like, maybe he rivered the ace. Which to me means that she was very certain in how she was classifying his hand holding, right? In her head, at that point in time, he either had 7x of diamonds, which turned her dead, or nearly dead. He had flopped a set, or he had ace-x of diamonds.
Didn't think Tiger was capable of the gut shot check raise.
Right. She didn't give him the king-jack of hearts, obviously. So she was like just very positive that he was bounded, didn't have bluffs in range, and she could confidently fold the absolute top of range, which in theory would in no way, shape, or form ever find a way to not put the remaining 15K in the middle, right? Okay, that happens. Whatever, no big deal. Watching it in real time, I'm just like, oh, that's a blunder, but obviously I could see the hands too. So I've made hero folds, no real criticism here, but I know how it feels, right? You get a little flush in the face, your ears are a little red.
I've definitely had moments like that live. I feel like, you know, I totally understand the flustered thing.
Yeah.
Would I put myself in those games consistently? No, because
Sure.
I mean, I would probably be way more flustered, but
You made a hero fold also.
one
A.
in your lifetime.
Queen 10. Poker.
He did it one time.
I folded a full house, man.
He did
That's a
fold-
fucking hero fold.
Wow,
fold
that
a
is a
boat.
hero
Sure,
fold.
you're right.
It was
He
not a good
finally
fold.
makes it. Yeah,
It
he
wasn't
finally
good.
makes the hero fold, and it's wrong.
Oh,
I was punished.
Yeah.
Yep.
man.
I was
Never made
Matt's-
a hero fold again. Probably
Nope.
never will.
Never happening again. Okay, so literally moments later, so she reloads after that hand, which we'll show a clip of this a little bit later. It's kind of a different conversation, but she kind of struggles a little bit with the reload, having a tough time coming up with the number. Finally gets the reload in, and now she picks up ace jack of diamonds in the big blind. So we're going to check out that clip now.
10 seconds. I'm in for 4. Big blind. David, cards, please. Adding on 1 minute. 10,000
That's
for C2.
how much?
1,200.
Okay, so actually here David opens. The graphics are wrong. David opens here
What is this?
to 1,200. So it says David limps. He does not limp. He raises to 1,200. And we're going to see, it looks like a 3-bet from Poker Bunny here.
10 seconds. Can I have a time shift? 5,000 now.
She goes 5K. So David opens to 1,200. Graphics are incorrect once again. And she goes 5,000.
Video out.
And David short stacked just moves in. Poker Bunny, I mean, she's priced in. She put in 5K here. She put in half his stack. She can't fold. She's priced in with any 2 cards. You can't fold when you put in half. Okay, and she just folds.
Wait, how much?
I don't think I've ever run
Wait.
this in my life. Every week I see a different person doing it.
And now she realizes,
Wait,
well, it's too late.
Give her a take back. She didn't realize how much.
Garrett. Rare you hear Garrett with the needle. Oh, she is flustered. She is quite flustered.
Fine. I'm not even good. Fold, fold. I don't have quads. No big quads, yeah.
Okay, I want to talk about this sequence of events and first and foremost the role that Garrett plays, as well as you know, a little bit of what I think is unfair scrutiny that was kind of thrown his way. So first and foremost, the sequence of events where she ends up making a hero fold with kings that's incorrect, and then follows it up with making a huge mathematical blunder where, again, this guy opens off of 25 blinds to 3x. She 3-bets appropriately with ace-jack suited, and he shoves for a min-raise. She doesn't recognize his stack size, doesn't even ask for a count, just finds the snap fold. Then after the fact, kind of realizes that it wasn't for very much more, and she should have been calling, and kind of says, like, how much was it, whatever, is visibly frustrated, or flustered, I should say. And Garrett kind of hits her with a little bit of a needle, right? So he speaks to I think it was David that she was in the hand against, and goes, give her hand back. She didn't realize it wasn't much more to call. And he goes, no. And Garrett replies like, okay, next time, right? It's a very subtle needle in a clear moment of weakness for Paulina. And there was a lot of criticisms and cries of, I don't want to say misogyny, but like kind of, I don't know, making it seem like Garrett was making her feel less than in that moment. And though that may be true, again, I would make a pretty strong argument that this has very little to do with gender. So let's zoom out for a second and kind of like get the lay of the land, right? So first and foremost, Garrett makes the game bigger because he wants to play bigger, and everybody seems relatively willing to do so. So nobody really balks at it. He has a pretty great spot where blank check Ben is sitting deep at over 100,000. Of course you want to play bigger blinds at that point. David only has like 10K in front of him, so it doesn't matter if you're playing 1-2 or 2-4. He has no chips in front of him, right? And everybody else is like pretty well stacked, with the exception of Paulina. But Paulina's mostly studied at 100 big blinds, so the thoughts are that she'll reload to 40K if they play 1-2-4. But I think that's worth noting because I think that plays a little bit into this series of events. The game got bigger. She wasn't necessarily prepared for it. She doesn't have the chips in front of her to play 100 big blind poker. She only has 50 bigs in front of her. And now another guy has an effective stack of 25 bigs. And we kind of see this meltdown happen sequentially where she's playing 25 big blind poker effectively and doesn't realize that she's priced into a call, makes a big error shortly thereafter, or I guess immediately thereafter, or at least after the needle. She gets visibly flustered, right? Now I want to talk a little bit about the needle. So Garrett is a consummate professional. He's been playing high stakes for as long as anybody can remember, and he's really earned his stripes to get to this point. I think, especially in today's game, where there's such a divergence amongst the young up-and-comers who are hungry for this spotlight, who are hungry to overtake the high-stakes scene, who have all the tools and resources available to them that the old guard didn't, that fast-tracks this path, that allows them to get there by 23, where it took a lot of us, the better part of a decade to arrive. And also I'm coming from an athletic standpoint too, where like there's a clear hierarchy on a team, right? There's a clear hierarchy in sports where if you're the freshman, if you're the new guy, if you're the rookie, you're going to have to really earn your stripes. It's not that you have to prove yourself as a talent. You have to live up to your talent, of course, but you have to prove yourself as a teammate. You have to prove yourself as a peer. You have to prove yourself as belonging in the arena. And with that comes a lot of character-defining moments where you're tested. And I think that that's just what we're seeing here with the needle. And not only do I not think it's out of line, I think it's like a mandatory rite of passage, so to speak, in a situation like this where they're competing against one another. They are not brother and sister. They're not best friends. They're not.
He's not her mentor.
This isn't
correct.
a 1-2 game down.
Even if it were
at a local poker game.
Even if it were, it's not his job to show empathy in this moment. Now, don't get me wrong. I would be praising him just as much, if not more so, if he did show empathy in this spot in general.
I mean, he could like squat and fart on the table and everyone would be praising him. He's just beloved.
Sure, I wouldn't go that far, but I guess like the point I'm trying to make is,
I don't know, Garrett, try it. See how the reaction is.
The point I'm trying to make is that if his default here was to show a bit of empathy to somebody who is under the bright lights for the first time and is kind of cracking, right? If that were his default mode, if Landon were there and going through the exact same experience and his default were, hey man, don't worry, it happens, you know? And there are guys like that in the arena. Like I've fucked up plenty. And there are a handful of guys that just like recognize that you're good and you belong and they want to make you feel better about a shit spot, right? JRB is actually a great example of this. He's not one, especially if you're new, to kick you when you're down, but that's why he's a host, right? Like I'll never forget this is, it was just embarrassing. It had nothing to do with play, but the very first time I got invited to the big game, I was literally playing 5'10" 2 months prior. And now all of a sudden I'm playing 3-6-12. And I wasn't able to just make that transition smoothly. So I show up with my fucking backpack with chili in a thermos for, like in fucking Ivy's room where you can order John George and like get all this high-end food care. I didn't know. I'm just
you had like a lunchbox.
Yeah, I'm just some poor kid from Pittsburgh who's getting the opportunity of a lifetime, right? And I'm just trying to fit in as best I can. So we take a break halfway through because that's what high rollers do, I guess, whenever they're guests in town to entertain and they want to go get dinner. And JRB asked if we want to go to John George's on him. It's like, yeah, sure, let's go. As I'm walking, or as I'm like picking up my backpack to follow the group, somehow there was so much pressure on my thermos that the lid blew off.
Oh no!
No!
You had
chili
like Kevin
everywhere.
from
Yeah,
The
Kevin,
Office.
Yeah, he had Kevin's famous chili.
Wow.
So it sounds like a bomb just went off in Ivy's room, and my book bag is covered in chili.
No.
And they're all just like, what the fuck was that? And all I could do is own it. I'm just like, I didn't know we were going to get dinner. I packed a thermos, like, you know. And he was so nice about it. He's like, you know, he kind of like made a joke, not at my expense, but like with the series of events of like, oh, you know, sometimes it's tough to shake those blue collar roots or something like, you know, lunch pail roots or whatever. And it was fine. Like he made me feel good and welcomed and fitting in. But again, that's his role, right? That's his job. Garrett's job is to be that. Money. Yeah, he's to be that guy, right? Like I would feel like Garrett. Like if I were in that spot and Chris K or Landon were at the game and I'm watching them have an unhinged moment, hey, welcome to the fucking league, Rook. Like,
yeah,
this isn't going to be the first and it's not going to be the last, and I don't care if you stay.
Right.
So let me remind you once again how much effort it takes to get into this arena and sustain. And here's your needle to make you feel like, you know, this is a memorable moment.
It is a rite of passage. Like, and just being a female shouldn't like keep somebody from doing that.
Exactly.
I think we should all be looked at as equally, you know, competitive.
And that's why I made the point of if his default is to show empathy in this spot, I would be praising him for it. But if his default, much like mine, would be, hey, this is a moment you're not going to want to forget. So let me remind you even further with this needle kind of thing, and like a welcome to the bigs type of mentality. That's my default. That's Garrett's default, clearly. I'm not going to change that because it's a woman, because that's disingenuous now. That is demeaning to her. It's reductive, right? It's basically saying that the only reason I'm showing you any grace in this moment,
because I don't think you can handle it,
or because I think you're attractive, or all of the other ancillary reasons that come with being a female in a male-dominated space, right? So I think to like point out that he kind of kicked her a little where she was down here is so ridiculous to me. And to make it a gender thing is even 10 times worse. It's like he should be praised for the fact that he would treat this situation the exact same regardless of gender.
Yeah.
100% agree.
I mean, most of the people I'm seeing call it out as misogynistic are men. There are a few women sprinkled in there, but it's mostly, I mean, the commentators and man, so from my perspective, it's not, and we should be free to be criticized just as any male in our position would be too.
Yeah.
You're a pretty nice guy, though. Let's get something straight. If something like earth-shattering happened to someone, you'd be nice. You'd be nice.
Earth-shattering, maybe. Things that happen within the construct of the game.
Yeah.
Like they shit their pants.
No, like if there was like a situation, like call it the chili situation, it's happened to someone else, like you'd be nice.
That will induce pathos in anyone, though. That's just like sad.
No, you're right.
I mean, it just depends on what it is. Like, it's obviously like a scale thing. Like
No,
that,
you're
like,
very-
That's outside the field of
Outside of the
competition.
mechanics
Right.
of the gameplay, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Somebody
Yeah.
shit themselves?
Right.
Sure.
Like,
All
that's,
right. Like
you know.
all right.
Yeah, for sure. Just be like, hey.
You can't
look.
control the chili thing.
Right. Outside your but like when you just like fuck up,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be there to remind you, you fucked up.
Yeah.
And like this game's not for everybody, so
Yeah.
strap in because you're in for a long ride.
The first big game I played, I live misclicked. And it was so awkward. The whole table was silent after. But
Right.
I accidentally min 3-bet Emma because I thought it was a straddle. And then, I min 3-bet and then played the hand as if I had raised the straddle. So, of course, the whole thing was wrong. And,
and like to
I
me,
won't forget that.
To me,
but
that's those are character defining moments for the people doing it. But for the entertainment purposes, like those are layup like joke spots.
Yeah.
You make light of it. And yeah, it's at the expense of the person who made the error, but that's fine, right? It's not a criticism of character. It's not a tear down, like, you're such a piece of shit. You min raised?
Right.
What do you hate dogs? It's like
Right.
that's not what's going on here, right? It's just like, yeah, we're all
It
human
happens.
and we're shining a light on the fact that we have human moments.
Yeah.
And we should be able to make fun of that type of stuff. So I think like, yeah, I just wanted to get that whole narrative out there because I do think that there's a lot of underpinning of because she's a girl, she's treated in certain ways. And she even alluded to that in her tweets, basically saying like, I'm so glad to think that people don't think I'm cut out for the stage because I'm a woman. It's like, that's not at all what anybody's saying.
No.
Right? Like the general narrative is you're not cut out for the stage because we just watched you have a meltdown.
Mm-hmm.
And it was minor, right? Like, and it's one that I think not everyone, but I think a lot of people in her situation very well could have had, right? Like, I don't think this has anything to do with her typical antics or the Poker Bunny character or anything like that. It was literally just a sequence of events that went really fucking poorly, and a lot of errors, human errors, were layered on top, and that makes you emotional.
Yeah.
Right? And getting up and leaving was like an actual pretty mature thing to do, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have devolved more had she stayed. It's probably a good time to take a break anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it seems pretty impossible not to. So that's going to carry us into the next part of this conversation that I want to have. And it basically stems from a tweet thread that the producer of Hustler Casino Live put out, Patrick Kern. So he was a part of Ryan's crew at Live the Bike. I know he did like a lot of the editing, a lot of the promo videos and stuff like that. His stuff's actually pretty great. I think he has a bigger role here at Hustler. So he tweeted a relatively lengthy thread. It's a 12-parter. But he's basically saying like he's trying to raise the bar of free live streams as they know it. And he wants to appeal to a wider audience, citing things like Logan Paul, No Jumper, Barstools, etc. And I think first thing to point out or to mention is how much those influencers, let's call them, actually are already a part of the poker space, right? Like Barstool has a poker podcast. No Jumper, Adam22 plays the game. He recently had Mickey on, and it was wildly successful and popular. So we're not really talking about reaching too far outside of the general collective that's already watching poker. And he's basically saying like, he wants to get people who have never really played poker outside of like a $5 sit and go in their kitchen. Basically people who like know the rules, but haven't necessarily really participated or watched live streams or anything along those lines. And then he kind of like just states that Bunny is a huge facilitator of this, and cites that the weekly games that she plays in have additional views when she's in the lineup as opposed to when she's not. So she is a character that drives people to the screen, right? Finally, he mentions that they were able to break through the barrier of the 10 to 15K concurrent viewership whenever they did the Duran Ivy stream. So the major point that I really want to focus on here is the idea that the Hustler Casino live stream is more so building a reality show than it is building a poker show. And I kind of proposed this question on onslaught of this pod, but I'd like to hear some other opinions as far as like why you watch, right? So, LeMan, I think you're a good person to start with in the sense that like you've been around since the very first Live at the Bike. And, I remember how big of a deal that was to us in the early 2000s because live stream poker just wasn't a thing. The Poker Road podcast was like so fascinating to us. We got to hear the insights of like Gavin Smith and Joe Seabach who are like on the tour and, just giving us the day-to-day breakdown of what it's like. We're a long, long way away from that, right?
Yeah.
So are we just trying to watch cut and dry poker now, or like should we be looking to build this out in a reality poker show sense?
Yeah, I definitely think they should try to build it out. I mean, it's if you want that broader audience like he's talking about, then you need to have storylines and character development, because if you don't, then you're just going to have the people that are strictly there for just the poker and nothing else, and then you cap your audience for sure.
So I guess doubling down on that, Andre, you might be a good person to ask about this. In your opinion, what would be most probable to bring in outside eyeballs? Stirred up or I guess drummed up drama that can be built into a storyline week in and week out, or influencers with an audience that come from an arena outside of poker?
I would say the latter. The biggest problem is going to be budget.
Right.
Someone like Poker Bunny is like honestly very cheap compared to giving the 5-star treatment to anybody that's going to come in outside, whether it's crypto, whether it's basketball or whatever. And if you can find someone like a Poker Bunny where you can cultivate that person and make them very attached to your brand image, then whatever they do, it's going to be synonymous with hustler. And we tried to do that with Run It Up. It's just very difficult.
Yeah.
Doesn't storylines like that just get built out from like people just playing against each other week in and week out though? Like you don't need to do all this extra stuff.
Right. So I think I think your point's very valid, Conrad. I think that the big thing that's being lost in what Patrick's tweeting is that Bunny isn't bringing in new eyeballs. Bunny's retaining eyeballs you already captured, right? Storylines and character development doesn't get a new person to click on your video that has never clicked before. There's no way to market that, right? What's the thumbnail look like that a random person browsing YouTube would click on and expect to see a meltdown or a fist fight or anything, right? There just isn't one.
I think
right?
you'd almost need a secondary show. I don't know if it would be possible, or if you could have a broader audience where you build the narrative of what's going
way
on.
Too much Bravo, and I
Well,
know.
I know.
You know what? I was thinking.
But that's what you need.
I
He
was
wants
And then
Andy
you can
Cohen
have
to come
show
in.
on top. No, but like if you had like building characters and building it up to this game they're gonna play, and then they watch the secondary show and they start to know the characters, their backstories, all that kind of stuff, and then you get them in the arena.
But it can't
to play.
function, right? It's cart in front of the horse in the sense that
Yeah, it'd be very difficult.
you can't build out a character-driven show that has no plot line to it or no narrative, right? You can't develop that. Basically, what you're talking about would be like a video podcast of sorts, or like what Bravo does, where they do the reunion shows or whatever.
I think that where I was having some like icky feelings about it, when I reframe it into this is a reality show, I think that it's sort of advertised as simply a poker stream, and maybe that's why people are like, what is this, when they have stuff like that happen. But let's say if they were to have like a confessional camera in that back area or something, so when someone storms off, they can go cut to the confessional or something, but it's just production cost is obviously a thing
No, that's
there,
super doable.
But like that would sort of solidify the branding as this is a reality show. It's not just a cut and dry poker stream. Like this is because when I see it as a reality show, I'm a lot more forgiving of this sort of antics and stuff.
Yeah. I don't want to lose sight of why I think that why I think that desiring this type of drama or amplifying it from the standpoint of Hustler Live isn't accomplishing what I think that they wanted to accomplish. I think it's very critical to delineate between acquisition and retention, right? So if we're looking at this from a marketing lens, which is exactly what his tweet is implying he's attempting to do, new acquisition does not come from drama or it doesn't come from nuance. Let's put it that way. It doesn't come from nuance, right? And in order to understand drama, you need to understand backstory. That's why you're suggesting a secondary show or whatever. Again, that's all already going to be for the audience you've curated.
Right.
Almost, it's never going to bring in new eyes, right? The only way to generate new eyes through the dramatic lens or whatever is to get people outside of your space covering it. So if ESPN were to say, or TMZ, for instance, were to say, check out this meltdown on Hustler Casino Live, sure, you're going to get some new eyes that way, right? But again, that's secondary. You can't plan for that.
And it would have to be a famous person, someone already famous. They can't just like home grow a person and have
That's
it
also a
show up
breaking
on
point in
TMZ.
the end of this person.
Not necessarily. No. Look at celebrity these days. Like literally, this is Kim Kardashian's brand, right? This is now Kanye's brand. Like they lean into the drama.
Publicity kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, for better or for worse.
I mean, they'll even have like errors in their Instagram posts. The Photoshop, it'll be like their arm is all warped, and that's not a mistake. Like
right,
they
have
farming. They have top level people, but it creates controversy.
Yeah. So
weird arm.
I think it's very important to stop the narrative of this is good for attracting people to our show. It's not, but we can make a pretty strong argument that it's good for viewer retention. Hell, I watched, right? And I'll tune in and out every now and again. But I also watched and stayed because Garrett was on and winning. And that's the bigger point I'm trying to make is as to why Bunny's not bringing in new eyeballs. If we look at the most viewed videos on Hustler Live, they're all huge names in the poker industry. So they're already established names. It's Garrett, obviously, Ivy, Durr, Antonio Esfandiari, and then highlights of all those same people. The only exception being Mickey. Mickey can bring you new eyeballs.
Everybody loves Mickey.
Mickey is already famous in another industry.
Wait, what's he famous for?
Drama.
Oh, okay.
Drama, high stakes gambling.
Yeah, high stakes gambling.
Because his Adam 22 video did really well. His interview.
Correct.
Have you ever seen his Instagram? Like
I don't know anything about him.
He's basically an anomaly. He's like the male version of Bunny in the sense of instead of leaning into sexualizing himself / playing a role for the cameras, he is creating this like elusive, unknown idea that like he got filthy rich through gambling, but can't really say how or why, right? So he just posts like stacks of millions of dollars in cash.
Literally like suitcases full of cash that he's like wheeling through the casino. It's wild.
The IRS is just like...
Yeah, it's like great for optics, right? And he obviously does gamble at very high stakes. That's also huge. And he does have this like kind of like cultic personality where he's surrounded by women and porn stars and all this other stuff.
Sort of like a grimy Bilzerian.
Yeah. I mean honestly, like having met and played with the dude, he's a very nice, sincere, cool dude. Like there's something very magnetic about his personality too.
Right.
But again, like even if we were comparing this 1-to-1 with Bunny, the difference is that he's already established in his industry. He already has 6 figures in followers.
Yeah.
He comes with a platform that gets amplified now by your platform.
Yeah.
She only retains the people that were already watching because she breaks up the monotony of stale poker.
Yeah.
Which is still worth something.
100%.
Yeah.
That retention is obviously worth a lot. But now it becomes a question of it, like what cost, right? So where is the line between both parties leveraging an opportunity versus one party exploiting another, right? And I think that this is where, you know, that blurry line of is it okay for them to have a tight shot on her boobs? Is it okay for them to follow her every single time she gets up? Is it okay for them to, only hold on the camera angle from behind so that there's a solid 90 seconds of just her ass in a shot?
Right. I mean, so again, I sort of probably just today reframed this from a reality TV perspective in which they do stuff like that. But if I'm just looking at it from a poker standpoint, this is currently like the most visible woman in poker.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't have a lot of female players in general. So unfortunately, like, she makes up a large percentage of visible women in poker just by being one. And to me, in the back of my mind, I'm just thinking about future women who might have an interest in being a person in the game, seeing this is what you have to do in order to get eyes on you in this industry, which is very unfortunate. I mean, and I don't think it's true, and I don't support that message that's the only way to become popular in the game. But it is sort of a uneasy message to be sending to new women.
It also is kind of the only way to become popular if you're not talented.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that Poker Bunny's not talented or that there aren't other talented women, but it is to say that it's the easiest way to fast track.
Yeah, it'll definitely
all eyes on you, right? And from the male side, it's also true, mimicking the Blazarian type of path, right? If you can fake being this playboy who is surrounded by, gaggles
money.
of women and has access to infinite money, that draws in eyeballs.
Mm-hmm.
And now if you have talent to back that, you get to stay, basically, right? So it does, the difference is that we have representation on the male side that isn't blitz, right? We have plenty of just wildly talented players who make up the top 1% of poker, and it's almost all exclusively men.
Mm-hmm.
So there are counterbalances to this sort of fast track, right?
Yeah.
We don't really have that so much from the
I feel like there
side.
used to be more visible women. There was like
Liv,
yeah, like back in that chunk of time, there was a few female players that people could choose from as like, that's my favorite player right now. But
Few is still like under 5.
Yeah.
Right?
And the barrier was much lower because to quantify talent, it was kind of just you were intelligent and won. Where now to quantify talent, you have to stack up not just against the best of your peers, but also against the objective answer in the Sims, right? So there isn't a whole lot of room in our industry to be a freestyler, especially if you're a woman.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's some room to be a Bryn Kenny if you're a guy, but I don't think a Bryn Kenny, like a female version of Bryn Kenny who is comparably successful gets much in the way of accolades. And I say that because Bryn gets scrutinized a ton.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like he's thrown up as like one of the 5 greatest players of all time. People don't view him that way. They do view him as a freestyler and think that like his time is coming where he'll fall. And it reminds me of like Selpst, who was very against the grain and kind of marched to her own drum, the beat of her own drum.
Everyone just said she was a punter.
Yeah. I
She
mean,
also won. So.
right.
Yeah.
She's so far and away the most profitable woman of all time that I don't know that we'll see it get caught anytime soon. And that's crazy to say given that the amount of buy-in.
It was like her and Chrissy, right?
Yeah. And I think that she's like 3x Chrissy's. Maybe that might be a little extreme, but I think she has something like 13 or 16 million in lifetime earnings.
Mm-hmm.
Something huge. I could be way off. It could be 6 and I would just sound like a total ass. But I know that she's atop the woman's all-time money list. And it's crazy because like buy-ins are only getting bigger.
Yeah.
So the ability to win a ton of money now is just a lot easier than it ever had been. But again, we just don't really see much in the way of women taking that path. So it does become a question then of, well, which came first, the chicken or the egg, right? Do you develop talent first as a woman and then seek out these opportunities in whatever way you can? Or do you develop talent while building this image and brand that you can leverage once you do feel talented enough to be able to hang in the arena?
So Vanessa on the Henan Mob won 12 million.
Okay.
Chrissy's won 5.3.
Yeah. Okay. So 2.5x.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was right around where I saw it. And like Chrissy's playing high rollers. So
Yeah.
she's going to have to like really get after it for, maybe another 5 to 10 years and compete at the 10K plus buy-in level in order to catch up to Vanessa. And Vanessa almost exclusively played 10Ks and below.
Yeah.
Right. So like these are big open field events where we're just, there isn't a whole lot of room. So, what do we do? Do we just lean in then to whatever girl's willing to leverage, her looks or whatever it is that people are into
Yeah.
to become a character? Or do we wait and see like what kind of talent rises to the top?
Right.
Please wait.
I think we wait. I mean, I think that, maybe we're just in a little bit of a lull for women in poker right now, but I don't know. I have hope. I'll try and throw my hat in the ring. I'll try my best.
I'm not sure if this is the right word, but like, I think it's a slippery slope, like sexualizing women.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's very slippery slope. Like, there's only so many women in this game, and there's no need for guys are guys at a poker table. There's some good, there's some bad, and putting out this, I don't know.
Well, it's especially limiting if we're already talking about a small subset of the player pool in women alone, and then saying not only do you have to be good enough to win, but you also have to look a certain way.
Yeah.
Right now, you're just massively reducing the pool, and it's like obviously no shock that only one or two may emerge in a decade or in a generation, whatever. So yeah, I think obviously that's problematic, but to that end, then if skill set aside, right? Let's forget about whether or not she belongs from a talent standpoint. Should then we lean into women like Poker Bunny garnering the spotlight for perhaps all the wrong reasons?
Should we lean into it?
Yeah.
Like, should we like it?
Well, no, more so, should we be overly critical of it in order to hope that it gets reduced in the future? Or should we just kind of like take advantage of the fact that this is a female in poker getting the limelight?
Is it better than nothing kind
Correct.
of thing? No.
Yeah.
In my opinion, no.
No.
But I think it's beneficial to her and to people profiting from her.
But you
other than
don't
that,
think that it does anything
I think it's
to
setting us back, if anything.
I think this is horrible for poker.
You elaborate?
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, if you just look at the way she's spoken about, there's not accolades. It's not about poker. It's about, women must just suck dick for stakes. This is just another example of how like women just use their bodies to get ahead in this game while we're just rotting in our basements, like sad. And it's just like, it to me, it creates more divide than anything else. And more, I don't like being lumped into that.
Yeah, that does seem unfair and a frustrating hurdle to overcome. And it's a weird one. I think Marley actually addresses this notion like pretty well because she deflects through humor a lot.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine how frustrating it is to assume that if you're playing a certain stake level, you can't be good, but that you had to have given some sort of sexual favor in order to accomplish that.
Yeah.
And I've literally heard that about every single girl that has appeared in a high stakes game in the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Hell, I've been accused of being the benefactor. It's like I've staked no one, but somehow, like just because I play in the same games,
You've staked me.
Well,
and I'm just gonna say,
I've staked no one in high
Is there any
stakes.
favors?
Ryan, you were doing sexual favors?
At a stake.
Right, and that's the thing. It's like if I put Brian into a 200-400 game tomorrow, where he hasn't played professionally in half a decade, and he's obviously going to be a spot. Nobody would say, I bet he sucked Berkey's dick to get into this game.
I'll say it. I'll be that,
you'll be that one.
balancing voice.
Right, like after a couple orbits of him misplaying a few hands, nobody's going to be like, whose dick did he suck to get in this game?
Right, no,
right?
but yeah.
They're going to assume that he has money outside of poker somehow, or that he is friends with somebody who has money outside of poker that just showed some grace and gave him a gift, but nobody would ever accuse him of a tit for tat relationship.
Right.
With women, it's only ever that. And I agree with you in the sense that I don't think we do any heavy lifting for women in this industry by over amplifying that they are sexual creatures and that they can leverage that for favors.
Yeah.
Do you think that the way that the poker mass populace views women in these spots is ever going to change? And if so, how?
I think that's a really valid question. And my immediate knee-jerk response is no.
Yeah.
So because my immediate knee-jerk response is no, then I start to question, like, well, if I were a girl, then would I want to be fighting hard against this narrative, or would I want to find ways into just leveraging
on it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have this struggle in my mind every day because, of course, it would be extremely easy for me to take that route. I could start an OnlyFans and make $500K a year, but it's just not, it doesn't resonate with me.
I'm not even
personally.
saying to actually
Like
go
sexualize-
through with it.
But
I'm saying to just embrace the right. Like, so what I'm getting at is, like, I'm thinking about, like, beautiful women that play higher stakes. They're all somewhere on some subreddit being accused of sucking dick for steak, right? And what I'm basically saying is, like, to my knowledge, none of them have.
Right.
At least not as that being
I
the sole source.
personally don't know anyone who, but I do know I know a guy who's used sexual stuff to back himself. I don't know any women.
God
though.
bless him.
God bless.
But what I'm getting
Get
at is,
that
like,
money.
is it more efficient for those girls in the arena who have the undercurrent or the undertones constantly in the back of their head, or I guess, like, in the back of their ear, saying, like, you perform sexual favors in order to get here? Is it more efficient for them to just, like, stop fighting against that narrative
Yeah.
and embrace the opportunity and leverage that as
start
much as they
sucking
can?
dick for
No,
steaks.
not actually doing it. No, not actually doing it.
Yeah.
But, like, there's a lot of EV that comes attached to the perception that you would.
Yeah, no, true. And I think, there is a sort of line of, I think there's a lot of EV in sort of letting people think that they could. But it just seems a little bit, I don't know. I mean, I think it's unfortunate because it is plus EV to lean into that, but it's at what cost?
Yeah,
Yep.
it seems like it could also be, like, misguided / misleading and then potentially dangerous.
Yeah. I mean,
Because, like, people might think that if you lean into it, you're serious, and it's a potential possibility.
Yeah. I do agree that it's very, very hard for girls to joke. Marley makes jokes about this all the time. I know Marley very well. Marley's never done anything scrupulous to get backing. And she constantly, like,
Just
leans
destroyed
in.
her whole shtick, man.
I mean,
I
that
know.
honestly, her way might be, like, the most, the least stressful way
Correct.
to, like, deal with it, because
Yeah.
it's like, sure, yes,
But
I
then,
do that.
but the
It's
point
like
I'm getting
grabbing
at
the
is
hold of the narrative, right? Like, yeah.
the point I'm getting at is because she joked, or maybe not because, but on top of her joking about it, there is an underlying narrative that's exactly how she got to play high stakes.
Yeah.
And obviously, like, that's silly. But does championing against this narrative stop people from pursuing it anyway?
No.
You know what I mean?
People who think that probably have a lot of other preconceived notions about the opposite sex.
So I guess, like, going along those lines, then let's kind of talk about, like, what the potential fallout is if this is just something in our community that we're willing to accept and embrace, right? Like, if the whole idea is that for a woman to get ahead in a male-dominated community, and for what it's worth, like, this is a tale as old as time, right? Like, this is the secretary sleeping with her boss in order to get a promotion type of.
Or, like, in Hollywood, Weinstein.
Yeah. Like, if you want to get the role. So obviously, like, there's a lot of heavy lifting to be done to change that narrative. And I don't think anyone on this set is going to do it in any short order. And I don't expect the poker community to be the one to lead the charge.
They'll be the last ones to adopt it.
That suddenly, like, we're the ones who solved Me Too, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm getting at is, like, it's going to continue to exist. It's a cash flow industry where clearly females have an inherent advantage to be able to leverage their looks, their sexuality, and things of that nature, right? So it's going to happen whether we want it to or not. Narratives are going to pop up whether we dispel them or not, right? So what's the potential fallout? Because now all of a sudden we have this fishbowl that is social media and live streams and YouTube and things like that. And women inherently are just the biggest fish in the pond, right? They draw the most eyeballs. They garner the most attention. What can be the potential fallout then of this if you're constantly under scrutiny, you're under the microscope, you're continually hearing these narratives that probably aren't true, and you're constantly being reduced to a sexual being in an industry where you're trying to be talented?
Yeah, or at least just be taken seriously.
Yeah.
As seriously
as a
if
peer.
you would, if you were a male. I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of implied potential fallout, just in terms of, like we said, about the way women are perceived. But I agree. I don't think it's really going to change much. So we just sort of have to find our own ways to cope with that. What
about at an individual level? Like, I don't think we've been running this experiment long enough in the poker industry to really know what the downside is to, plucking a bunny out of the group and saying, like, okay, she's going to be the character that we build this show around. And we are not only going to highlight the antics, but we're going to encourage them to some degree. Like, how does this all potentially end? And,
right.
What does the happy ending look like versus the worst case scenario?
I think the happy ending would be her growing out of it and become, it seems like from what
could she
I
become
can
a spokesman of the industry of women? Could she be that face growing out of this, evolving out, being in high stakes for a decade?
Would be a big heel turn. I mean, she's probably stacked her odds in terms of being taken seriously as like a high roller competitor. It would be a big change in brand. I don't think it's impossible. It's sort of like, from what I have observed, like, it seems like she's sort of, on one hand, is reaping the benefits of marketing herself in this way, but on the other hand, like, wants to be taken seriously as a studied professional. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to do both. Like, you kind of have to choose one and put your ego aside and just do that. It's really hard to expect the public to see you as both.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, it's hard. I don't know her personally, and she says that she's only seen benefits from this, but I know just on a smaller scale that it can be really hard to be constantly criticized by the public. Like, I wasn't even getting criticized that much, like, when I was streaming or just being in the public. Like, you could probably speak to this more, just like being in the public eye and receiving criticism. It can be really tough if you are, like, if you're not in the headspace to stay grounded during that.
Well, on top of that, you're inviting it.
Yeah.
Right? So, like,
and you were the only one inviting it also.
Well, not really. It's getting amplified by these mediums also, right? So, like, when you go on a live stream, not only are you inviting criticism, but now it's being amplified by the producers of the show and the audience, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, I think everybody in this room has some experience with it. Landon, you're probably most recently to you.
It gets easier the more you deal with it. Like, at the start, I guess the biggest negative feedback when it comes to an ego perspective or perspective when it comes to being credible in poker, I guess, would be like having to quit the Perkins challenge a quarter of the way through. And then I didn't see much of Twitter, as I was told to take a break from it for a couple weeks. But from the rumblings that I did hear / relog into Twitter and see, a lot of it was like calling me a quitter, scammer, this, that, whatever, like, you name it. And at first it sucks because it's like, I didn't know that people thought of me this way. But as soon as like people have you give them an inch and they'll take a mile.
Yeah.
So as soon as that starts happening and that becomes something that you think resonates with you personally, it becomes a lot more of a struggle to think about how to either help the community in a positive way or what's it all for. And then the more that sort of happens and the more that dies down, the more that I've realized personally that none of it matters.
Yeah.
Like what matters to me and what matters in my like progression through poker / life or branding myself or whatever is the people that are in my corner are always gonna be in my corner. And I know that. Anything else is kind of irrelevant.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really impossible to overlook how much being in a niche community and being a recognizable face in one, it parallels to high school in a lot of ways. You know, being consistently invalidated at something that you're pouring all your time and energy into, it's a really strong uphill climb to be able to shrug that off and stay on course for the bigger goal or the bigger objective at hand. And I think that, you know, it's worth noting that there are pitfalls to this, right? So it wasn't that long ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, that we saw something similar to this happen in the poker community. Brandy Harbaker was a very attractive girl who came onto the scene in the early 2000s and kind of made a splash in the online forums as a very divisive individual. She, she won a little bit here and there, but she was like very outspoken in the forums and took a ton of flack, right? Like just a lot of pushback from the community, a lot of, I guess, I don't want to say arguments, but just scrutiny as a whole. And part of that was because she was leading with the sexualized nature of the male-female dynamic in this community. She was leveraging it hard. Andre didn't show the picture, but there's a picture of her like wearing a full tilt patch as a pasty. You know, it's like that shit gets clicks. And we're talking about like 2006, where social media wasn't really that big of a thing yet. Forums were where everything got amplified. Poker media at the time is where everything got amplified. There's a lot. She's spent more time on Card Player than I have, as far as like photos, articles, things like that. Like there's more about her than there is about me. And I was in the game for 20 years. I think she was in the game for like 18 months. So like, you know, sex does sell. And she leveraged that hard. And there was just a lot of, whether they were incels or just disgruntled men that were very vocal and in invalidating her as a person, as a poker player, as a respected individual in the community. And no matter what her results were, nothing could take away that invalidation. And it led to what I would assume to be validating behavior seeking, right? So she dated within the community. She dated, she seemed to date successful players who could potentially mentor her, but more importantly, maybe shield her from some of the scrutiny or the invalidation that was constantly taking place, and it only would amplify. She had a mentorship with David Skalansky, who seemingly took pretty heavy advantage of her in what was described as a tit-for-tat relationship, where they were like traveling together, and it seemed to just be very creepy without getting into all the details. Maybe this is a rabbit hole we'll go down someday in another podcast, but it's too long to get into now. But ultimately, this resulted in her taking her own life, right? And, you know, her family basically said like she did have some mental illnesses that were maybe a little bit undisclosed, and that's probably always going to be an underlying factor when suicide is involved. But we've seen a lot occur in the last 20 years as far as bully culture goes and cyberbullying. And, you know, this is a real outcome that is a non-zero chance of happening. And I'm not laying this on Poker Bunny. I'm not saying like she's going to take this to some extreme degree, but I am saying that we have examples of this having happened in the past. And whether it's this iteration with Poker Bunny now or another female somewhere down the line who sees this, emulates it, gets blown up as being in the spotlight, and then ultimately understands it's more than she wanted, right? And it portrays her in a way that she doesn't want to be perceived by peers or by the general public. How much responsibility do we have to shield young women from this, right? Like, be it Hustler Live as a show, be it the poker community as a whole, be it us at an individual level when playing with women. Like, you know, from your vantage point as a young woman, like, is there anything that you would expect from a corporation, a show, a community, an individual, or anything along those lines?
I mean, it would be different if they were like blatantly manipulating her into doing this, but she's made it pretty clear that like she wants this.
Mm-hmm.
Even from the way that she titles her own clickbait, she doesn't mind drawing negative publicity to herself, knowing that it will result in more attention. So, I mean,
But do we want this?
do we want? I personally don't.
Like, I mean, like, do we want this as a community? Like, it's.
Well, I guess that's my bigger point, right? Like, should something happen, right? Like when Brandy committed suicide, the 2+2 forum had blood on their hands.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
David
absolutely.
Sklansky to some degree had blood on his hands, right? Like, there's no getting around that. And I guess like that's something that I don't want to be lost in this conversation. Like, when bad things occur, I'm not saying that we'll play the blame game thereafter, but I'm kind of saying that people will have had a hand in it.
Yeah, as we talk, the only thing I can hear is we as a community. In a way, shape, or form. I'm not sure what it is, but like.
Well, it can be not celebrating the train wreck when it's televised, right?
That could be it.
What we all watched.
I watched the fucking shit out
Yeah.
of it with that shit.
It's
happened.
hard.
I have a very nihilistic view of all this. I think the writing is on the wall, and it kind of sucks. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but we already have a framework of all of this, which is like reality television and 24-hour news.
Yeah.
Both of them have gone down the same path, and they're much more matured than the poker community is. Like, this is Poker Bunny to me is like Jersey Shore or Real World, that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Where now, 2022 right now, look at where the Learning Channel is. Look at where Discovery Channel is. Turn it on in a hotel ever. It's reality TV. It's just what people crave. In terms of news, this is between the cycles. Like, literally, Poker Bunny is between cycles of huge people coming on, whether it's Bill Ivy, any of the names.
Yeah, it's just to retain viewers in that Tuesday through Thursday time slot.
Correct. And so what I'm thinking is, like, we know how this scales, which they're going to look for more people like Poker Bunny where they can retain those viewers, because at the end of the day, the goal is always, how can I get the most money out of the community? How can I have
Lowest upfront cost.
correct?
Not for nothing. I'd be perfectly fine if Landon was on there with bunny ears or something along those lines.
I think it's a banana hammock.
Yeah, banana hammock.
Like, listen, like,
Moose
seriously.
antlers.
Listen, man.
I don't like
it's,
it that
it's almost summer. We're almost there.
I don't like. I think it's that I just don't like the feeling of sexualizing women and like just doing to this.
It
to
feels
the minority.
exploited.
It's the minority. That's the problem to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels
It's the
exploited.
minority, and men are fucking men. Like, this doesn't lead to, I don't know.
It
These
doesn't lead
forums
to
are
good.
not
It's not, like, it's not a good message when you are blatantly objectifying a woman's body on the live stream in a male-dominated field where a lot of the men are already having ideas about women as
Yeah.
objects. I mean, it's from just a general safety standpoint. Like, it doesn't make me feel more safe in the parking lot.
I think that's like the first course of corrective action that could be taken is just, it's not avoiding it. It's just doing a better job of portraying it, right? Like, you don't need a dedicated bunny cam. You don't need to go out of your way to focus on her outfit, right? Like, just treat her as any other player there and let her personality do the heavy lifting. I think that's a lot more reasonable and fair. And it doesn't pin these undertones that aren't being spoken. Right? Yeah, she's dressing a certain way, but she's not talking about leveraging sex for opportunities or anything like that. But when you're constantly filming her in a way that implies, with the way she's dressed and the fact that she's here and the fact that she's willing to allow us to almost sexualize her through the way she's the way she's like telecast. Now it's not a large leap for the audience to start to make these assumptions.
I'm gonna finally play that clip, by the way.
Okay.
So that's 9.
Confused?
Obviously.
Is that what I'm talking about?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean this is just like a one-off, right?
You could probably compile all of
Wait, oh my.
Yeah. And had you let that clip run a little bit longer, she actually just like, as she sits down, she's like, "Oh my God, like, was the camera just on my ass?" And it's kind of like one of those things where I can't tell as a viewer if she's actually upset that they would have the audacity to film her in a way where her ass is the main focus, or if it's more of a lighthearted, like, oh man, like,
Well, it's
here.
also like, does this become the standard? Like, if I were to go on a stream, are they going to zoom in on, because I don't want that, but
Right.
is that going to become the standard for when a woman is on a live stream that we get zoomed in on in that way?
And
I
that's
hope not.
like what we don't know. We don't know like how much discussion is taking place. Like we don't know if Patrick was kind of like, "Hey, like this is the angle I want to take with you. What do you think?"
Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh yeah. Like definitely, I'll dress a certain way and highlight that as much as you possibly can."
Right.
What
I
if
mean,
that was the case?
I think that it's fine for Hustler Live, and I think it's fine for Bunny. I think it's bad for the overall community.
Yeah, it's
Does
like
anything change from a hustler standpoint if they're concerned about their own viewership? Like the reason why I ask is because if it's good for them and like it's like, oh, who cares about the poker community? Why change?
Well, let's go to an extreme case. Like, what if she physically harms herself?
Yeah.
And points to this as the trigger.
Yeah.
Right? Like that should change something.
Yeah.
But we can preemptively just do better. I actually said this to her the last time I played with her, and I think it's really relevant to the conversation as a whole. I said this to Paulina because when she speaks in game, she is in her own world where she believes that she's in this fishbowl and she's the only fish, and everybody's watching and scrutinizing every single little thing, right? Like there were a couple other clips I didn't chop out, but like one was she got check raised on like a 995 board, and she was just like, "Oh my God, you did that because I did this," and it's like, no, he did it because he had a 9. He wasn't looking at you. He didn't notice any of these little quirks that you think he noticed, and it just reminds me of like the David Foster Wallace speech of "This is Water," where we're so convinced that we're the center of the universe and that the entire world around us and our reality all revolves around us specifically. And I think this directly applies here because I think from the vantage point of Bunny, that's the way she views this opportunity. I think from the vantage point of Hustler Live, that's the way that this opportunity is being viewed. And it's solely like, what can I do for clicks? And it's not really considering the ripple effect of the potential negative outcomes. And we don't have to look that far, right? Garrett is a very willing participant in these live games. He benefits tremendously from them. He gets to play really great games. He gets to make a living doing something that he absolutely loves. And he gets to become a bit of a star in his own little arena, right? But there's a big part of him that doesn't want that fanfare. There's a big part of him that doesn't want that spotlight. There's a big part of him that avoided it for a long time. And he's spoken out heavily about how impactful it was and some of the deep, dark depressions that he spiraled into. Maybe it was directly correlated, maybe it was only indirectly correlated, but it is absolutely something that we have to consider. Like being under the microscope 24/7 and constantly being validated or invalidated on a bunch of nameless faces that you've never met or spoken to in real life is something that will weigh on the human psyche a lot, particularly if you're already predisposed to any sort of negative fallout. So I think like, the end all be all message of the "This is Water" is look beyond the four walls that you're entrapped in, right? Like look at the world in a different light where, the real hit home point is when he says, you're in a line at the grocery store and you're tired and you had a long day and you just want to get home, and this grocery cashier is dead behind the eyes and taking her time and doesn't seem to care about anybody else, yada, 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 only to come to find out that like she just lost her husband and, you know, her mind is, it's like, if you can find that level of grace and empathy to look and analyze all these spots in a bigger picture way, I think we ultimately come up with a better product. I think we actually are able to achieve scale in a meaningful way, because what we're trying to do right now isn't moving the needle. Achieving scale by increasing our clicks by 10%, by including somebody that is, you know, potentially being or potentially ending up worse for wear based off of how intensive the process is, isn't true scale. That doesn't get us into other arenas.
It's low-hanging fruit.
Exactly. It doesn't get us into other arenas. It doesn't bring in other already disenfranchised groups such as women, minority, et cetera, right? We need a bigger picture solution when we're talking about the growth in this industry if we ever care to see that industry grow. Otherwise, it's just going to be a bunch of selfish actors trying to increase their bottom line by some degree.
Until it just continuously devolves, as you see happen to YouTube channels, where they'll start off with some little thing, it gets lots of clicks, and then there's like 4 years go by, like this mukbang guy who was just a normal sized man, and then 4 years go by, he's been just trying to keep up with the clicks and trying to increase them, and then he's this huge man, and his health is terrible. I mean, that's sort of like a metaphor for how it could go.
And you don't have to look any further than online poker. If everybody involved is only looking out to increase their bottom line, it becomes apocalyptic, right? Like it just becomes something that is a dying star where the end is already written, right? It's already dead. We're just watching the process of that death.
You can say that's true now.
I do think it's true now.
Yeah.
That's why I use it as an example. And I don't think it's true yet for live.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're that far off. Like this industry is struggling to bring in outside money. And the reason why we're not touched by advertisers, the reason why we're not touched by an influx of money from comparable markets like sports betting and crypto, et cetera. We are to some degree, but not to the degree that we could be. The reason for that is because we've made ourselves unmarketable.
Yeah.
And this just furthers that narrative in my opinion.
It's interesting because like MTTs do really well.
Yeah.
Like live MTTs, like
barrier of entry is nil.
Right. But then when it comes to the cash game scene, it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to like public games at the casino aren't really that real anymore. Like they are sometimes, but most of them are just privatized. And why wouldn't they be?
Right. It's better bottom line for everyone involved.
Yeah.
I think that's the struggle, right? Until we become a marketable industry, we just continually are going to contract until we go back to the way things were in the 90s, where it's 100 people nationwide playing this game professionally, trying to round up a sucker or two that will help them pay their bills. And that's a very dystopian future from my vantage point. It's also a long way away.
It's far. Yeah, that's far. But
it's a long way away because we had the boom was so massive. And it rippled out so far that it would take decades for us to get to that point. But I don't think that I think we're much more along that path than we are the path of growth.
Yeah, we'd hopefully all be out of poker by then.
Yeah.
In 30 years.
Yeah, but I don't want to be the guy who left a community worse for wear than when I first entered it. You know what I mean?
It's like a hill right now, or like poker is kind of on like the decline of the hill.
Yeah.
And then dies.
And then it dies. I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation that we had.
Yeah. Nice spot to end.
Regarding all things drama, I guess. Poker streams, poker characters, poker personalities. That's going to do it for us today. Christian will be back tomorrow. I'm heading to Pittsburgh on actually tomorrow night. So we're going to record and then I'm going to take off on a flight. Landon's actually going to be going to Texas as well. So he'll be out the rest of the week. I'll be calling in from PA where I'll be playing the Bet MGM series. If you guys are in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, or Michigan, be sure to check that out. I think they kicked off yesterday with some pretty big guarantees. There are still spots open for the Heads Up tournament. It's a 1K buy-in. They're adding 10,000 to first, so they're basically doubling first place prize. Be sure to check that out. And just be sure to tune into the stream. I'll be giving away a ton of phase tickets to the main event for free. All you got to do is show up. that's going to do it for today's episode. I know it was a long one. I appreciate you guys all sticking through. Please like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. Please give us your opinion on today's show. There's a lot of discussion points. I'm looking forward to carrying on the conversation even further in those comments. We appreciate you guys as always, and we'll see you tomorrow.